Can you refute atheism? Well, if you could, you'd have to know what the hell atheism was in the first place, and the religious are singularly terrible at that. They don't have a clue what it is, what it means, or what any of the people who self-identify as atheists actually think, and I don't think they want one. That's why they spend so much time inventing straw men. And if you wanted yet another example of that, I can do that. So let's go take a look. Today, we're going to go take a look at a Muslim channel that's supposed to be all about disproving Christianity, but he's going to take a shot at atheists too, because what else is he going to do, right? Unfortunately, he has no idea what atheism is, what science is, or, let's be honest, much of anything else. Because the religious tend to be absurdly ignorant of pretty much everything outside of their tiny religious sphere, and they can't figure out why we're critical of them for doing so. So, here we go again, exposing stupidity wherever it hides. Except this time, it's just not hiding very well. It's pretty darned obvious what the problem here is. So, off we go.
It's commonly said by atheists who were former Muslims, or in other words, ex-Muslims who leave Islam. Most of the time, not always, but most of the time, like 90% of the time, they become atheists. They stop believing in God.
And this is why you script your videos. Sorry, I just had to jump in there because he's just rambling incoherently. I could have said the exact same thing in a sentence. So, yes, we've established that mostly former Muslims become atheists, and that's a good thing. I'm sure our theist here wouldn't agree, but who cares about that? Facts are facts, reality is reality. Most religious people have neither one. Now, I hope he's going to find a point sometime because so far, no, he hasn't gotten anywhere close. But I can just point out that your mic is meant to be clipped to your shirt, not just stuck in front of your face. Lavalier microphones are really not intended to be used like that. They don't pick up sound well that way. Mostly, we just get to hear you breathing. Do it right. Don't be a moron. But anyhow, let's get back to the video.
And I just want to say that, the atheism is kind of childish, and like there's a lot of evidence against atheism. I mean, there's good evidence to believe in the existence of God.
Really? Let's see some. Because this is a very common claim, but when the religious are asked to produce evidence or produce proof, they fail miserably. Maybe it's because they don't understand what evidence is. Maybe it's because they don't comprehend critical thinking or skepticism. I mean, there are a lot of possibilities here, but they have a piss-poor track record of actually proving their points when given the opportunity, and that's pretty sad when you think about it. So let's think about this for a second. The title of this video is The Logical Reason and Evidence for God. Let's hope that our theist here can do a better job and produce some logical reasons and evidence. And I wouldn't be holding my breath on that, but let's see. I want to be fair. Go ahead. Show us, prove to us where we're wrong.
Now, without getting into the evidence for Islam, which would be, the prophecies of the Prophet Muhammad coming true, the prophecies of the Quran coming true, etc., without even getting into that.
It's a good thing that you're not, because that's just nonsense. You don't have a single demonstrable specific prophecy any more than the Christians do, because this is just cherry picking and bald rationalization. Just like the Christians do. You're not going to impress anyone with what you've actually got. We need, on such and such a date, this very specific thing will happen, prophesied significantly in advance with significant detail that can only refer to a singular event, and it cannot be affected by humans seeking to see that prophecy fulfilled. Give us some of that. Oh, right, you can't do that because you've got nothing like that. And even if you did, while it would be of intellectual interest, it still doesn't prove Allah is real. You'd have to prove Allah existed and was responsible for that prophecy, and you can't do that either. So this is just an emotional claim made for no intellectual evidence-based reason. And he says, we're childish. Yeah, pal, look in the mirror.
Let's just refute the atheistic, the atheist first point is that there is no God.
Which only goes to prove that you've never actually spoken to an intellectual, skeptical atheist. Now, that's not really that uncommon. The religious tend to openly avoid having their preconceptions challenged. Their beliefs are all just made up, and then they just sit there and make a fool of themselves because now actual atheists get to see how absurd their straw men actually are, and we don't have a problem pointing out where they're wrong, because they're wrong a lot. So, in reality, most atheists don't say there is no God. That's a lie. We simply have seen no good reason to think that there are. We have heard your claims, and we don't believe your claims. We have listened to what you've said, which is more than we can say for you, and we don't believe you. That's the difference. We think you're full of shit. That's all atheism is. The fact that these people don't know any better, that they spend so much time and energy spinning a straw man, that says something very unflattering about the religious. Because either they're too dumb to know any better, and that's not too hard to believe, I guess. They didn't go out and do any research of any kind on their own before breathing heavily into the microphone, which I think is pretty clear. Or they do know better and they're just lying to make money and get influence from their followers. Yeah, bingo, guys. In the end, it's all dumb or dishonest. Take your pick. This is what happens when you listen to your priests and your pastors and your imams and just assume they know what the hell they're talking about. Because it's pretty rare that any of these people have a clue. Then the believers just go on to make fools of themselves because they haven't done their own due diligence. Imagine that.
So let's refute that. So even atheists are admitting, like, there's many arguments against atheism and there's many arguments for the existence of God, but I just want to focus on like one of the main ones, and it's that space, matter, and time were created by something outside of space, matter, and time. Let me explain.
Really? Prove it. Because you're just throwing a lot of assumptions into the mix that I don't think you can rationally back up. And this is why, once you point out the utter failure of the religious assumptions, they tend to run away. It's easy to back them into a corner because they don't actually have the ability to think critically or skeptically or rationally about anything. They hold irrational beliefs for emotional reasons, and the second you point out the flaws in that way of thinking, they're headed for the hills, often throwing insults and threats behind them as they go. Or sometimes, especially in the case of the Muslims, they try to kill your ass because they don't take being proven to be idiots very well. So I'm going to let him get into this before I completely shred everything he has to say. But I'm willing to bet nothing is going to change. The religious just don't care about the facts, even when shown that everything they believe is an unsupportable lie. They don't stop believing, do they? And that's kind of a problem.
Even atheists are admitting, atheists like, the late Stephen Hawking, etc., even atheists are admitting that space, matter, and time had a beginning out of nothing.
Yeah, not so much. Granted, our specific presentation of the universe, our particular version of the universe, it did have a beginning of sorts. However, it didn't come from nothing. Nobody says that except the religious. The Big Bang was an expansion of already existing stuff. It wasn't nothing, at least not that we can tell, since we really can't see back beyond Planck time. It's not the nothing that the religious assume that it is. So again, dumb or dishonest, you decide. Because these people can't imagine that everyone isn't just like they are. We all have to believe the same things they do. We just won't admit it. We're just telling stories. We really believe. Except we don't. We really don't. We think the things that they believe are stupid, and for good cause. They're convinced we actually believe it anyhow, though. And that's just dumb.
Well, if space, matter, and time, if space, matter, and time had a beginning out of nothing, whatever created space, matter, and time can't be made of space, matter, and time.
Except that's just a claim. You are assuming a creation. That is not in evidence. Creation presumes purpose. It presumes a creator, which is just a religious position. They are just assuming they are right without first proving they are right. And of course, since we have to be just like they are, we have to assume creation too, even though we say otherwise. Because that's just us lying, right? This is really the absurdity of trying to have an intelligent conversation with the religious, because they can't understand what anyone else is trying to say. And they can't be honest enough to just admit it when they're wrong. Because they just can't be wrong. Really, just ask them.
In other words, it's a uncreated creator outside of time, space and matter, outside of the space-time continuum.
Yeah, not so much. You have not demonstrated that, and we certainly don't believe it. But who cares about that, right? As long as they get their overactive egos stroked, screw reality. We have no evidence of any kind that there was a creator of any kind. Thus, there is no good reason to believe that was the case. The religious, running on pure emotion, they just want it to be true. It just makes them feel good. Therefore, God. That's what they're going to claim, and that's what they're going to insist is true, evidence be damned. They can't understand why we have a problem with that. Go figure.
So this being who is beyond the world also created the world.
And now we're up to a being, all of which is just yanked straight out of his asshole, and he's completely unaware of why he's getting it all completely wrong. I'm really expecting him to get to "and Allah" next, because he's desperately trying to get to the conclusion that he's emotionally predisposed to want to reach, without recognizing that he's missing every single step necessary to intellectually reach it. And it's funny how none of them realize that that's what they're doing. When you point it out, they're completely oblivious, because they're not used to having to think in rational terms. Faith is enough. Faith is all they need. Except, whether they like it or not, it's not.
So I'm gonna have some more videos on this, but this is like one of the arguments I have against atheism and people who say there is no God, because space, time, and matter had a beginning in the Big Bang, and something outside of the space-time continuum had to have caused the space-time continuum. And when we think of a uncreated being, it's God.
Well, there was a Gallup if I ever saw one. In just one sentence, he went from something had to create it, which isn't the case because, as I said, creation implies purpose and a creator with active intent, and there's no evidence for any of that. Then he jumped to being, which simply does not follow. Then he just ran around with the goalposts until he reached God. One sentence, that's all it took to completely prove that he's got no clue what the hell he's talking about. And he's not alone in that, of course, because the religious are all just as dumb and dishonest. Take your pick. And this is not at all uncommon. They're not even aware that they're doing it because intelligent thought never went in to any of the bizarre crap in their heads. They're just believing things for fee-fees. That's it. And that is just absurdly stupid. Reality doesn't revolve around your feelings. And they don't care, do they? Sad, isn't it?
So that right there refutes the atheist first point that there is no God. Stay tuned. More videos are up ahead.
It does nothing of the sort because, as I said, that's not something that atheists say. So he's just debunked his own straw man by making broad, sweeping pronouncements that exist nowhere but inside his own head. And that's pretty much true of everything that they say, if you notice. He knows nothing about cosmology either, because cosmology doesn't say the things that he's claiming. These are all the ideas that his silly religion has pushed into his head, and because he approaches them completely uncritically, he's never gone to see if any of it was actually true or not, because he doesn't give a damn. None of them do, which is why we continually catch them in all of the same kind of stupidity or dishonesty so consistently. He doesn't comprehend science. He doesn't talk to atheists, and he's buried in his religious bullshit so deeply that he can't see the real world from where he is. And then he thinks that there's something wrong with us. Go figure. Unfortunately, this is not at all uncommon. Most theists believe the same thing, and they behave this way because most theists are likewise dumb and dishonest. Their religion makes them that way. Don't ask questions. Don't have doubts. Just believe blindly and do what we tell you to do. Oh, and give us your money while you're at it. We need that more than you do. Yeah, and these gullible idiots can't see why they're being scammed. They actually take this crap seriously. It's no wonder I'll never be at a loss for videos to take a look at, because these people are dumb, or dishonest, or both. And they really need to grow up and knock it the hell off.
Bum